Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. We are gathered here today on the territories, the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 6, and I also want to acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. I'm Samir Kayande, the Alberta NDP finance critic for fiscal responsibility, and I'm joined here today by my colleague, Shannon Phillips, Alberta NDP finance critic for insurance and pensions. Next week, Danielle Smith and the UCP are set to release their 2024 budget, and we know it will be full of broken promises and lack the vision to improve any of the daily struggles Albertans are dealing with right now. Let me be clear. People depend on government to help them in tough times, and we're in tough times. Albertans are falling behind as wages fail to keep up with inflation. Our public infrastructure, health, and education is crumbling. The UCP offers more of the same. At the beginning of this year, Finance Minister Nate Horner said this budget would be an opportunity to finally build a resilient economy and strengthen services. However, the UCP likely won't ensure programs and services keep up with Alberta's population growth and inflation. Their failure to plan for rising costs and an increase in population means not only will this budget not be able to keep up, it's going to further exacerbate the problems we're seeing with affordability in our crumbling healthcare system. The economic indicators of the province are painting a very different picture than the UCP are trying to make you believe. Unemployment is up, productivity is stagnant, bankruptcies are up, the employment rate is down, and Alberta has been the worst performing big province for wage growth since 2019. What that means for everyday Albertans is everything gets more expensive while their salaries don't keep up. All of this does not add up to the economic resiliency the UCP are claiming. Alberta has no control over the price of oil or the value of the Canadian dollar, yet instead of reducing the budget's dependence on world commodity markets, what the UCP does is hope for the best. Hope is not a strategy. Yet Danielle Smith and the UCP are actively choosing to ignore the indicators telling them to change course as we head into this budget. Meanwhile, Albertans are struggling to afford their rents, refinance the mortgage, keep the lights on, cover the rising costs of auto insurance and gas. When the UCP talks about fiscal stability and resilience, they really mean that they will balance the budget with cost cuts in an already creaking health and education system. People rely on these essential public goods, and our need for them doesn't go away just because the UCP shrinks a line item. We need an honest, resilient budget that builds our public infrastructure back to the level that we as Albertans expect. And to speak more on that, I'd like to turn things over to Shannon.
Thank you, Samir. And so as we head into this year's budget, it's clear that Danielle Smith and the UCP are planning to maintain the status quo, which from this UCP government is an underfunded and understaffed healthcare system that is literally crumbling at the seams, being held together by duct tape. Surgeries are not happening in a timely manner. Operating rooms are being closed. Emergency departments are closed across the province, and there simply are not enough nurses and other healthcare workers to cover shifts. The UCP status quo is families not being able to afford the rising cost of utility, insurance, or rent. And the status quo is to create conditions such that 60% of family doctors are looking to leave their practice. Danielle Smith's projections on CPI and population growth have no bearing in reality, at least what we've seen so far. In healthcare spending alone, the UCP's projection for the upcoming fiscal year does not even keep up with their own CPI and population growth estimates. To maintain business as usual, we would need to see a 5% increase in the budget next week. But with our healthcare system in the state that it is now, no one wants to maintain business as usual. Not the doctors considering closing their practice, not the nurses having their overtime cut by the UCP, and not the over 800,000 Albertans who cannot find a family physician. We need improvement, and the only thing the UCP is delivering is broken promises. You will recall that this government campaigned on fixing the healthcare system. It has only gotten worse in the last year. They campaigned on lowering taxes by developing a new tax bracket on income under $60,000, but did not bring that in. They campaigned on lower utility costs with a payday scheme to divert the high prices to the summer The result was the highest utility rates the province has ever seen, and by far the highest in the country. Now, on top of all of those ways that the government is making life more unaffordable for all Albertans, they are increasing economic insecurity for everyone by going after our CPP. The number one thing that the UCP needs to address in the budget next week is how they plan to fix the mess they have created in healthcare and ensure we have the funding in place to address infrastructure and staffing shortages. Closely behind it is to stop the economic insecurity that they have been funding through millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded ads to sell us a CPP scheme that Albertans do not want. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to get into the question queue. Just please state your name and outlet and who you'd like your question directed to, and we'll start in the room.
Hi, Shaylan Skolsky with CTV News in Edmonton. Whichever of you would like to address the question. I know, Shannon, you mentioned the 5% increase at minimum that would be required to help the struggling healthcare system. So what number would you like to see? What do you believe is needed so that we can not only maintain business as usual, but improve and, as the UCP cited, I guess, fix the problems that are plaguing the system?
Well, I think what we've done here is laid out an absolute bare minimum and also laid out that last year's budget documents do not forecast the kind of investment that will be needed in order to stabilize and grow the healthcare system. And so what we are saying is that we are establishing what it has to be at a minimum, and that is to maintain the status quo. The status quo of closed emergency departments across the province. The status quo of 800,000 people not being able to find a family doctor. The status quo of 60% of our family physicians considering leaving their practice. That's a 5% to maintain the status quo. I think we can all agree that it is unacceptable and that we have a healthcare system that is bursting at the seams and falling apart quite literally. So it will have to be something more than that, and we will have to see next week.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, there are those on the other side of the spectrum that say that debt servicing costs that are being shouldered by everyday Albertans are far too high. The Fraser Institute suggests that debt servicing costs increased from about $61 per Albertan in 2007 and 8 to $672 in 2023. I guess, do you believe that there's merit in spending any surplus that we may have towards debt servicing instead of towards social programs like the healthcare system or a new income tax bracket?
Well, Alberta's various debt comes due at different times. Through the reinvestment of surplus revenues over the last 2 fiscal years, we have seen some action on that. There is no question that inflation has an effect on government debt as it has on our ordinary people's mortgages and everyone else through the economy. It also means higher revenues for the government as well. So those two things balance each other out. I think that given Alberta's current credit rating, which is actually quite good, what an ordinary Albertan in Westlock or Barrhead or Milk River, who have had their emergency room closed, where you cannot deliver a baby anymore, where you have to drive 2 hours down the highway while you're in labor, I'm quite certain that folks in those communities or who cannot access a specialist care or who have lost their family doctor would urge the province and the Fraser Institute to reinvest back into the healthcare system, given our overall fiscal position.
Bonjour, pour Madame Phillips en français peut-être?
Oui, on va voir.
Oui. Emmanuel Prestovette avec Radio-Canada. Est-ce que vous pourriez résumer l'annonce d'aujourd'hui?
Alors, aujourd'hui, on parle de ce qu'on va prévoir pour la semaine prochaine. 3 choses. Nous avons vu que l'Alberta a vu beaucoup d'inflation et nous avons en même temps nos services de santé et éducation qui ont perdu beaucoup de leurs fonds à l'inflation et aux croissances de la population. Alors, on va voir la semaine prochaine et on veut voir des investissements très, très substantifs, en particulièrement dans le système de santé. Numéro 2, beaucoup de gens ont beaucoup de soucis au sujet de leur coût de vie mensuel Et nous avons vu rien de l'action par rapport au gouvernement, aux frais d'électricité et aussi aux frais de l'assurance pour les autos. On va voir la semaine prochaine si le gouvernement va prendre action sur ces sujets-là. Troisièmement, nous avons vu ce gouvernement-là a dépensé des millions de dollars pour faire des avertissements au sujet de la pension du Canada et le système de la retraite. On va voir la semaine prochaine si le gouvernement va abandonner ces plans-là parce qu'ils ont servi du gaspillage de l'argent public et aussi ils ont créé beaucoup de soucis en particulièrement dans les populations âgées qui ont autre chose à s'occuper dans les matières économiques. Et le gouvernement aurait dû abandonner ces plans-là pour un système de l'Alberta, de retraite pour les Albertains.
Thank you, merci. My follow-up is going to be in English. You mentioned the promise of creation of a lower tax bracket by UCP that wasn't fulfilled, yet your party actively campaigns against that last May. Do you now think it's a good idea and it should be implemented as soon as possible?
I think that politicians shouldn't lie to people at election time in order to get elected.
Okay, thank you. Now head over to the phones. And Janet, your line should be open. Hey, Janet, we have you ready to go if you're ready. Okay, well, Janet, we'll get back to you if we can. We'll just do one more quick pass for questions in the room. All good. Okay, sorry about that, Janet. We'll reach out to you after the presser. Thanks, everyone. That concludes our press conference for today.